Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Impact Careers series. My name is Pamela Delany, and I am the Dean of Enrollment for Graduate Programs at Prescott College. Here at Prescott College, we have a wide range of programs in undergraduate and graduate that are intertwined with our commitment to social and a more social and just and equitable world for all people. Our commitment is to provide you with information that helps you determine careers that have an impact in the world. We know that many of our students come to us for a graduate degree education, but they also want that career to mean something and to make a difference. And so we've had past sessions on environmental, social, and governance, and we have had a session on community health and well-being. So this is the third in the series, so welcome. Today, we're going to be focusing on growing range of careers in social justice and equity. We'll talk about what we found out when we looked at the career data and learn directly from our three amazing panelists whose careers are already making a major impact in the world. Before we start the session, I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. To make this webinar free for people who aren't able to attend the session, we are recording that and we will share this on our YouTube channel and our website. So if you have any discomfort with being shared, you can change the name in your Google chat or just into your Zoom chat, or feel free to hide your picture to respect your privacy. That would be wonderful. And then I would like to introduce my co-host, Naomi Aide. Naomi. There she is. Wonderful. Naomi is our Director of Graduate Admissions, who runs all of the admissions processes for our graduate programs. She leads an amazing team, and she will be capturing any questions and comments that you have in the chat. Please feel free in the chat to answer questions. We really want this to be a time for you to be able to have your questions answered. While I have questions to ask the panelists, it's very important that we have them. So from you. And so please feel to put comments, introduce yourself. We'd love to know where you are and what you're interested in learning more about. So keep that chat active so that we stay engaged throughout. And when you have questions that come up throughout the panel, then Naomi will interrupt me at the end of a question and get your question out there for the panelists. Before we start, also, I wanted to let you know that there are upcoming events, so that if you are interested after the session learning more about our programs, then here's some different ones. We have a graduate programs open house on April 14th. These are all virtual sessions. And this is going to be a review of all 14 graduate programs at Prescott College. And you would find, if you attend that open house, that individuals in that session are, that you will learn about all of our programs that really do have a commitment to social justice, environmental justice. And then we have an MBA session on April 19th. Our next careers series, Impact Series, is focused on education and training, and that will be on April 20th. And then we also have a graduate applications workshop on April 28th. So first, when we get started, I wanted to let you know how we came about the data. So when we are looking at careers in social justice and equity, we specifically looked at data from a subscription that we have called MC Burning Glass. This is a database of thousands of job boards from across the world and compiles data on what's happening currently, what's happened in the past, and trends going into the future for very specific occupations and job postings. So we use that job to look at, to look for these type of careers. And we're going to be talking today to Teresa Conrow, who is a union organizer, educator, and author. Roger Harris, a political organizer and Gain Power Fellow, also a Prescott College student and current alum, and Dr. Anita Fernandez, who is our Chief Diversity Officer at Prescott College, and also is the director of the XITO, which is a teaching institute, and she'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk a little bit first about framing what social justice is compared to social services. So when we're looking at careers with impact, often that comes from a desire to help and a desire to make a change. Social services jobs are sometimes, they're certainly focused on social justice and people that are working in those fields, can be very dedicated to it, but their focus can be slightly different. So for an example, a mindset of a social services organization might be something like people need our help and assistance to navigate society's systems. So they may need access, they may need immediate access to housing or food. They might need, they're basically private individual acts for an individual person. Social justice, on the other hand, is a career that is based on decolonizing systems to provide justice and equity for all people. It's really about careers working in areas that are directed at root causes of injustice, responding to long-term needs, and resolving structural injustice. These are typically more public and collective actions than private individual acts, which I see is on my slide, a little bit of an error there. But work in social justice, most often goal is for long-term social transformation, which then in turn provides that assistance to people, but also changes the system so that they don't have to worry about operating in it. The system is now suddenly or hopefully improved for them. When I looked at IMSI and looked at careers in social justice and equity, I did a search over January 2021 through January 2022 and looked specifically for job postings that show social justice and equity as two separate hard skills. And that means they're not just in the job description somewhere, they're actually listed in a desired skill by the employer. And so what we found was 47,479 unique job postings in that year. And by unique job postings, what that means is that the system has a way of accounting and taking out duplication. So that means that there were over 47,000 original jobs posted in the United States last year. 63% of those jobs desire a master's degree or higher. And then key skill sets that these jobs looked at were, that were requesting were skill sets in social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, health equity, planning, and communications. And the median advertised salary of $72,600 for individuals with a master's degree or higher. So what type of careers can a person have with a focus in social justice and equity? I would argue that social justice and equity skill set should be integrated into every career, for even those who might be in accounting, for example, or working in a grocery store, right? Any career, I mean, this should be central to all of us. But if you are looking to become a long-term change maker, some of the trends that we saw, and I lost my screen there, some of the trends that we saw are, we're seeing an increase in requests for diversity and equity inclusion, just like our own Anita Fernandez. These are, there were over, I'm just looking at my screen, there were over 1,400 job postings last year for roles of this type, with 67% or 65% requesting a master's degree or higher. And skill sets that they were specifically looking for were DEI initiatives, strategic planning, social justice, change management, with an average posted salary of about $85,900. We also see a demand in careers for organizers, and those could be people that are engaged in political organizing, union organizing, community organizing. There were over 1,800 postings last year. 48% of those desired a master's degree or more. And the community outreach and organizing clearly are the examples of what, of what employers are looking for, along with social change and advocacy, with the posted salary range of around $40,000 to $65,000. Then another trend that we see are the desire and the need for employers for program and project leaders and managers. So these would be program managers, program directors, executive directors that could be in private and nonprofit organizations. And there were 773 of these postings, about half looking for a social justice or for a master's degree or higher. And again, some of the same skill sets across the others, with an average posting salary of $72,400. And then a very large area that people might not think about is the idea of education and teaching. You know, how do we make an impact in the world? And a lot of times that is through educating or helping establish how education is being delivered. So we're looking at pedagogy. So 2,678 postings last year, 80% desire master or greater. with skill set desires and pedagogy, strategic planning, social justice, advocacy, with an average post job salary around 72,000. So you can see, and these are, by the way, these tend to be adjunct. A lot of them, we saw a lot of adjunct instructors and university professors, but we also saw a lot of higher education and K through 12 administrators as well. So I think this is important to know, just because to think about all of the areas that social justice, these are just 4 that really kind of rose to the top of the list when we were, when I was taking a look at this. So now that we have a little bit of framing, I'd really love to introduce you to the panelists. And I'm going to start by having her introduce herself. Her name is Teresa Conrow, and she's a labor rights and justice organizer, teacher, and author. And she does have some slides that I'll be presenting for her. So if you'd like to, whenever you'd like to jump in, Teresa, please feel free to, and I will just hit next slide when you'd like to be hit next.
Okay. Yeah, so we can go with the first slide, Pamela. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit today just about some worker organizing that I'm involved in and that has openings, a lot of possibilities for folks that want to learn worker and community organizing. We have a lot of opportunities working on this particular campaign. So I'm going to focus in on that. And it's around Amazon. So it's a well-known employer, and the location where we're doing the work is in Southern California. And it's a combination of worker organizing, environmental justice, as you can see, the combination of the trucks and the warehousing industry that gets consolidated is a real kind of, there's like diesel death zones around these warehouses of Amazon. So we're dealing with that, and then also racial justice. So it's a community that the kind of political power structure has been very white and very male. And that is changing as the majority of the citizens are Latino and African American. So yeah, we can go to the next one. Amazon is not just any large company. It's a company that's changing the way that we do work, the way that our whole economy functions, essentially. So with Amazon's business model, what we've seen is the destruction of bookstores was one of the early ones, right? That many of us remember, the little kind of local bookstores that used to exist. And Amazon's like in grocery industry, which is a heavily unionized industry with good paying jobs, but is coming in competing with very low paying jobs without benefits and pension. And then I work with the Teamsters Union, and our biggest membership area is UPS. And UPS folks make a good wage, always can be better, but a good wage with pension, healthcare benefits, and the right to speak up on the job. And that is being threatened by Amazon. Again, low wage drivers without safety precautions, just it's really running havoc with our folks. So what we're seeing is the potential within the next 2 years of Amazon becoming larger than UPS, which means that in the same way that we don't see the little bookstores anymore, we may not see, unionized jobs in the delivery service. And also with the post office, same thing, unionized sector, well-paying government, public sector jobs that are being threatened by Amazon, coming in, doing the work of the post office, picking off the profitable areas, leaving the expensive work for the public sector taxpayers to cover, but picking off the profitable work of the post office. And then they're involved as well in massive air industry as well, same thing, cutting down pilot salaries. And then they've recently merged with MGM in a $1 billion deal. So we're going to see a massive change in the entertainment industry as well. So for us, it's a really critical fight. It's not just any fight. And so we've kind of strategically thought about where and how to do that. So we can go to the next slide. And you'll see I think the next slide is a map of Southern California. Yeah, there we go. So this is the area. So Amazon tends to consolidate and warehouses tend to consolidate. So we've got the largest port on the West Coast down in the kind of Long Beach, Southern Los Angeles area. So we've got massive shipping coming in, bringing the goods on containers, and then it gets trucked up to the area in the upper left, which is the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, and that's where the warehouses are consolidated. In the area of San Bernardino, almost half, 47% of the children in school are being treated for asthma or have had asthma symptoms, lung inflammation. The region has added hundreds of thousands more additional jobs. So that's great. And that's how it's been sold to some of the old political structures. But the problem is that the jobs are not sustainable. You can't live off of them. So only about 4 in 10 jobs in the area actually earn enough money that you can make ends meet. So the vast majority of people are not able to live on the wage that they're bringing home, and that includes Amazon workers. And of the Amazon workforce, at one point we did a survey of Amazon workers, and 66%, this was during COVID time, so recently, 66% are suffering from asthma, bronchitis, lung-related diseases, and other conditions that are particularly vulnerable to COVID. So what we're seeing is just this massive intersection of oppression, you know, on the basis of race, on the basis of class, on the basis of environment. It's like you really cannot breathe. And Amazon is the major employer in the area and is building warehouses everywhere. You cannot drive anywhere without being confronted with massive warehouses in an area that was farmland, orange groves, with a few goats that you occasionally see sometimes, but it's massive warehousing. So we've been organizing not just workers inside, but then also community members. So we can go to the next slide. So we've combined the issues. We had one big neighborhood meeting. And at that meeting, we asked people to rank what was more important, the trucks driving by their area, the diesel pollution, or was it the jobs and the low quality of the jobs? The turnover in Amazon, as many of you probably know, is 100%. People just cannot stay in. It's too physically demanding on people's bodies. So the agreement from that meeting is we should not choose, that it's both. There was quite an uproar about the idea of even trying to rank those two. So we're demanding good jobs and healthy air both. And there's been already a change in some of the power structures. So if you look down in the bottom right is Ben Reynoso. So he's now on the city council. So we're actually changing some of the political structures as we go, and then doing massive turnout of the community around environmental issues and also the job issues. So it's a pretty incredible shift in about the last 2 years that we're seeing, and we need help. So if you go to the next slide, this is a description of opportunities. So in the labor movement, it's really important to have experience talking to workers, either being a worker yourself or talking to, listening to, and organizing workers, both at the job site and also where folks live. So doing that work, it's a very skilled work that you actually kind of need to really learn how to get in behind people's stories, build long-term relationships with folks, develop leadership, and help people take risks to actually change things. So we have an internship. It's through the Labor Center in Los Angeles, and we have openings right now. So if anyone is graduating and has an opportunity to work and wants to get their foot in the labor movement, we'll provide work in the organizing that I've been describing in the Inland Empire, and then at the same time provide you with a lot of training that goes along with the organizing. So I've done a lot of organizing in different parts of the world. in many different industries, in mining and aviation, a lot in South America, also Australia, and dealing with some of the right-wing government changes in New Zealand and Australia. But this is some of the best organizing that I've seen. And it's really critical that it be kind of supported and added to. So we kind of see it as, you know, you used to be able to go to the South during the Civil Rights Movement. Well, now you can come during the epic of Amazon and multinationals, and you can come to the Inland Empire and actually put your shoulder to the wheel. And if you want to work as a community or labor organizer, again, the most important thing is really talking to people and listening to people. And that's what this internship kind of provides. And without that, you can have your master's degree, but you will be asked, what are you involved in? What have you done? So being an activist in any different movement or social justice related you know, cause is really, really important. And then having experience directly talking to workers and working people is absolutely key. So that's my intro and little recruitment pitch.
That is so wonderful. Thank you, Teresa. That was really helpful. And it was great to learn about your work. So thank you for sharing with us. So next, I would like to introduce our next panelist by the name of, his name is Roger Harris, coming to us from Florida. And Roger, as I mentioned earlier, is a current Prescott College student in our Master Arts in Social Justice and Community Organizing program. Soon to be an alum in a couple months. Congratulations, Roger. I am going to let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background and the work that he's currently doing.
Thank you so much, Dean Delany, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Actually taking time out of your busy schedules to hear us talk about social justice and equity is a really important contribution that you're making to us. My name's Roger Harris. I actually work as a fellow for an organization called Gain Power. The president of Gain Power is Amy Pritchard. She originally ran an organization called Democratic Gain, which was more partisan to the Democratic Party. But in 2020, Gain Power became a new inception of including social justice organizations, nonprofit organizations, and worked even in the international realm, as well as in domestically here in the United States. Amy approached me about helping out with a program that's called Representative Careers. After the George Floyd murder, many people in the progressive movement started asking the questions of how can we get more people of color involved in social justice, equity, and progressive movements. And it was a question that Amy Pritchard had been asking around within the progressive community. So she specifically asked me to be helpful to her in talking about representative careers. And what we both came up together because I'm a student with the Social Justice and Community Organizing master's program, was a fellowship where I would volunteer to mainly do community outreach and help out wherever I can to encourage employers to hire Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as women, in not only leadership positions, but to help many of our graduates and many of our students get their start in the progressive movements. As you've seen earlier with the numbers that Dean Delany presented, there are opportunities in this movement. There are opportunities for you to excel, and even in or outside of the SJCO program. I will put in the chat gainpower.org. Gainpower.org also operates as a clearinghouse. They have job openings on there, and specifically, some of them are political, many of them are social justice, but you can access them for free. Just like with Arena Careers or unionjobs.com, these are opportunities and chances for you to actually be able to get involved with this movement. So if you're looking to career change and specifically be involved in progressive movements, number one, I would encourage you to be involved with Prescott College. actually undergraduate degree or graduate degree. This degree program is a wonderful program that helps you get ready to be an organizer, where may it be union, labor, or political. My background is that I earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in political science from Florida A&M University. And at Florida A&M, I got the opportunity to work on several political campaigns, but also work as an intern with the Florida Education Association, which is the statewide teachers union. I got the opportunity to do that twice and to help the teachers lobby the representatives and senators in the Florida legislature, as well as the governor. So specifically at that time, it was just wonderful experience, and it was something that I could add to the resume. So by the time I graduated, I was able to go to Washington, D.C. and work for 3 women members of the House of Representatives at 3 different times. And again, it was that experience that I got in Florida, that I got during my undergraduate degree years, that helped propel me to working for members of the House of Representatives. But I would say too, being able to volunteer, because that's initially how I started, that's a good way to get the kind of experience that you may need. But once you don't want to volunteer just to volunteer, you also want to get to the point where you're earning paid positions. And specifically, this is why I had been involved with paying the interns, pay our interns, that movement, as well as other movements that pay young people a decent wage in order to get involved. If you're a mid-career person, and I found myself in this situation, being a mid-career person in wanting to prepare myself for that leadership position, I looked to this degree to help me to do that, or even be open to doing work at the PhD level or at the law degree level. But the master's in social justice and community organizing has prepared me to do that. And specifically, look at Gain Power. Gain Power has different kinds of sessions that they may do, and job fairs that they may do from time to time, where you can get involved and get the kind of training and help and assistance that you need. Again, it's gainpower.org. And I'll put that in the chat and finish with this introduction.
Thank you so much, Roger. That was really helpful. And I don't know if Naomi put that in the chat, but feel free to add it again in case somebody missed it. And thanks for presenting, and congratulations on getting really close to being done in a couple of months. And we're really proud to have you as a student and future alum. And so next, it's my pleasure and actually my honor to introduce Dr. Anita Fernandez, who is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at Prescott College. She's doing some amazing work. She is also the director of the XITO Institute, and she'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Pamela. Buenas tardes, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm really honored to be here with Roger and Teresa and hearing about their organizing opportunities and also learning from them. Special place in my heart, the SJCO program. As a former director of that program, I just love seeing the folks that are, now are in our advisory council and our alumni. So thank you for being here. I am here in Tucson on the occupied lands of the Tonotam and Hohokam people. I run the Prescott College Tucson Center, so I'm the director here of our site. And also right now I'm serving as the Chief Diversity Officer of the college. But my background is really in teacher education specifically. So I'm a former high school English teacher, English teacher, and I've helped to co-found a school actually in Prescott called La Tierra Community School, which is a K-8 school. And after being in Prescott for a while, teaching up there and constantly bringing my students down to Tucson, because this is where everything was sort of happening. Finally, the dean at the time said, you know what, I think it'd be best if you went down to Tucson and taught classes from there. And so started to develop what became social justice education semesters here in Tucson with our students. That was in the midst of the movement to save Mexican American studies here. There was a ban in Arizona on ethnic studies, but specifically on one program here in the Tucson Unified School District, Mexican American Studies. And I got very involved in that movement, worked with the teachers and the former director. And that ended up developing into what is now XITO, the Xicanx Institute for Teaching and Organizing. So when the program was banned, I got together with the director and a few of the teachers, and we decided that we needed to continue the movement and continue teaching this pedagogy and this practice that has been so successful with youth of color, specifically breaking and flipping the quote unquote achievement gap, flipping those numbers. And so the program was so successful that it was actually such a threat to the Arizona legislature that they deemed it illegal. And so we began to train educators and organizers and administrators and school counselors across the country, not in Arizona because it was illegal, across the country in this ethnic studies pedagogy. And so at the same time, going through a legal battle, a 7-year legal battle that it took to overturn that banning of the Mexican American Studies program, which was a very long haul and a learning experience in itself. Which ended up in not the replacement of the Mexican American Studies program, but much more importantly, it set a legal precedent for the fights that we're in now, 12 years later, where we are now up against some of the same exact issues with book bannings, the banning of ethnic studies, the banning of critical race theory, and legislation across the country that is attacking our queer and trans youth, specifically in schools. So that's a lot of the work that we are engaging in right now. I have only been the chief diversity officer at Prescott. Well, I'm the first chief diversity officer that we've had at Prescott College. I never thought I would be a chief diversity officer. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm really honored to be in this position that we've fought for, we organized for at the college for over a decade. And it is not at all my position. It's a position that a collective of us have worked really, really hard along with the students to demand. And so just want to honor that and say I feel really like I'm holding a space that is so critical for the college, and I'm passing it on to someone else, I hope. And just thank you for the opportunity to talk about that.
Thank you so much, Anita. We're really thankful for your leadership here at Prescott College and everything that we're doing under your leadership. So now we'll move on to the Q&A portion of the panel and the series. This is really for you as an attendee and participant to ask the questions that you have. So yes, I have some questions to ask. I have some general ones. I have one for each of the panelists directly, and I will start with those first. But in the meantime, please put your questions in the chat anytime, and we will bring them up as soon as the question that we're currently on is finished. So again, I would prefer to have your questions answered first. So know that you're welcome to do so at any time. So my first question is going to be for you, Teresa, and I'm really glad that you talked so much about Amazon and the work they're doing. I think we're seeing that workers are doing at Amazon. And I was looking at some data, and I think that in the United States, there are it's a 14.6 million unionized workers representing over 10% of the work, just a little over 10% of the workforce. So my question for you is, how is this transformation that's happening with these organizations, UPS and Amazon and Starbucks, how is that going to impact? What's going to happen down the line with other organizations once that number begins to grow?
South, there we go. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that there's almost two different roads, and we have to choose the road that, and we'll create the road as we walk it. But one road is that jobs become more and more unlivable, that you really cannot afford decent food, decent housing, and while you're working full time, and healthcare. So that's one road, and that's the road that we're currently on, that where we'll see that businesses, large, huge billion-dollar companies can actually just come in and undercut the wages and benefits for people so easily. The other possibility is that we're actually able to get into some of these huge companies, whether it's Starbucks, Amazon, any of the companies, and increase the actual conditions, improve them enough that you can actually live on those wages. And when we do that, it really doesn't matter to us, whether as union people and as workers, whether it's Amazon or UPS. We're fine with Amazon if Amazon can pay a decent wage and benefits and have the right to speak, for people to be able to speak up. Anita spoke a lot about collectivity and how important it is. And it's very, very important at the work site. We need to be able to have community as human beings with each other and to work together to improve things. It's just a natural part of who we are. And to have the right to actually speak and really talk openly with your coworkers is really, really key. So I think there's possibility there. We're at a point in the US where hopefully, I would like to think we've hit rock bottom and that we're ready to go back up where we were. And the economy was so much better when there was more of a level playing field in the 40s and 50s. Union membership in the US was similar to what it was in Canada, 30%, Australia. You know, the countries that have stable economies really do need the higher wages that unionization brings. And then the other issue we've got is from a global perspective. We've got, you know, the kind of reduction in people's ability to even have what we would see as a job. You know, it becomes very precarious work. So we're seeing just huge growth of precarious work around the globe, and that's growing in all countries. It has been strong in the South for a long time, but it's very strong in the North, as we all know as well. So go ahead.
Teresa, great. Thanks for that response. We have a great question from the audience. Amy from Florida asks, can any of you speak specifically about work being done regarding LGBTQ justice, particularly in schools with the devastating legislation being passed, and how can she be involved?
And thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Amy, for your question. Roger, she's in your state, but would you like to speak first on the legislative part and what you're seeing? I think that your state is quite impacted by this.
Yes,
as well.
Unfortunately, with the Florida legislature and just some of the anti-LGBTQ legislation that was passed recently, known as the Don't Say Gay bill. You know, it just really, it gets back to political organizing.
Mm-hmm.
It really does matter who is in those positions. And specifically, we have an anti-LGBTQ legislature and governor here. So specifically, what I would say to you, Amy, is get involved politically in the sense of finding out who was for that bill and who was for that legislation, who was against it, and actively work with those people who were against it. We're going to need a flip of the legislature and the governor's chair in order to rectify and change that legislation, to change what really needs to happen, and to, you know, to stop having these predatory kinds of legislation and bills out there. Specifically too, I would like to talk to you. I'll put my email in the chat, and we can specifically talk about or get you put into contact with groups that are actually doing the work here, and specifically groups nationally that are going to be focused in Florida for election 2022.
Thank you so much, Roger. Want to open it up to Teresa and Anita if they have anything that they'd like to add to that question.
I just want to be out as a lesbian and as a Teamster both. And I also want to say that, you know, I've seen a lot of changes over my lifetime on queer issues. And one of the things historically is that before legislation protected us at all for the right to marry, or we could just be discriminated against blatantly, openly, the one place when legislation did not cover us that we were covered was union contracts. In the non-discrimination clause, you cannot discriminate against, and the list would be there, and the unions didn't do it at first, but they did before anybody else did, put right in there by gender or sexual identity. So it's some place that as a union member, you can always go to fight for your rights as well.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. I would jump in sort of on the K-12 side of things and say that we work with a lot of school districts across the country. Some are like Florida that are being, you know, directly impacted. Others are being impacted in other ways, and it's so localized right now. So there's state legislation that's happening. There are regional issues, but then there are very specific district by district, depending on the demographics and the, you know, mindset of that particular community that folks are dealing with. There are FOIA requests coming in right and left to look at curriculum from family, from community members that aren't even part of that specific community. And so really looking, you know, statewide, but also very locally to who is organizing in your community. Asking, again, I'm happy to connect you as well. And I know Roger and Teresa have tons of connections. We just started to mobilize a National Liberated Ethnic Studies Coalition to look at issues that are intersecting. And so looking not just at ethnic studies, but how do we look at ethnic studies if we're not also looking at trans and queer rights, and how the students are being impacted in schools, and how do we build solidarity together? So happy to talk to folks about that as well.
Thank you, Anita. And this kind of brings me, I don't see another question, so I'm going to pose a question to both of you, because all three of you represent an area of a professional career that is very specifically focused on social justice and equity, whether it's political, union, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and education. But my question for you would be, how can professionals integrate social justice and equity into their work, into their careers, if they're in an area that one might not normally think of? And so, you know, an example is we have an MBA here at Portland State, or excuse me, at Prescott College, and it is, you know, it is that's the importance of diversity is built into that curriculum, is, you know, a focus on justice. But what can a person do if they're not? So, you know, you're an IT strategist, you are an engineer, you are somebody who is in something that one might not normally think of. What advice would you give? And I might also say advice that you would give people who are in that type of career that are like, I need to do something where I need to make a difference in this area. So is that a career change? Is that is it learning more about social justice and equity, and finding ways to integrate that into their current work?
I love this. I would just say organize would be my advice. So just decide where and when you want to do it. So on the job, you know, like the tech workers at Amazon did a huge climate strike and were able to win huge concessions from the company because of that. So it's tech workers organizing. So if there's issues, you know, we do surveys a lot of times with the companies identifying gender and race issues, and they go all the way up to the top of management. huge racial discrimination in many of our workplaces. So if there's race or gender or queer issues going on, organize there in your workplace. If you prefer to do it where you live, there's going to be stuff going on where you live, the political stuff that needs to be done. If you can actually build up a crew of your neighbors, I have a little neighborhood group that I just love. And so because I keep up on all the election stuff, and if I don't know, I find someone like Roger to ask, I'll just make sure that everybody's got all the info that they need during election time. So just wherever it is that you feel kind of moved to take action, just keep your eyes open and look for some folks that will help you so you're not alone, and just go for it. It really should not be a divide where, because you have an MBA, that therefore you're outside of social justice. No, we need you more than ever. And then if you do want to switch careers, talk to one of the three of us. Go to Prescott. So yeah.
Also, there are a lot of opportunities in tech. Just early 2000s, it came to be where a lot of the voter files and just the data kind of work all became digitized, and it morphed into what is called Voter Activation Network. There are groups like Tech for Campaigns and DigiDems that work with people who have the technology savvy to actually place them within campaigns and place them within organizations. There's also an organization called Meso Solutions, and they also have a digital tech portion for those particular jobs where engineers and folks in technology are needed. So come to our side. We need you. Those openings are there for people specifically with your skill set, and you can utilize that and be ahead of a technology. Be the head of a technology for organization that deals with this kind of data and specifically runs the kind of data that is needed for the organizers to talk from a factual basis.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Roger and Teresa. And Anita, you might have an answer, but I'm going to pivot into tag this on to a question I have for you. Because when we're looking at organizations as a whole that might not necessarily be committed to social justice and equity, but what can, we're seeing an increase in these jobs where organizations are bringing them in. I know my partner works at WL Gore, which is a medical manufacturing device company, and they are dramatically hiring for people to come in and work on diversity and inclusion initiatives. So, but as organizations and professionals start to move in this direction, what advice or what do they need to consider when bringing these initiatives forth within an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot they need to consider. And I think starting with, when we talk about bringing in diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice into an organization or a business of some kind, like how are we defining that, right? There's a huge continuum between what is DEI and what is more of anti-racist or decolonizing, and everything in between. And so what do we mean by that? Once we've defined that, are we actually going to have strategies that are connected to goals to basically dismantle systemic racism or whatever the goal is, right, within that organization? If we are, if it's just lip service, which is a lot, I see a lot of that, particularly after the summer of 2020. All of a sudden, everybody, was hiring a chief diversity officer, and what are they actually doing? And a lot of times, folks are hired, but there isn't a commitment to actually getting that work done and getting it done in a way that's going to make systemic change. And so, I think really having a commitment around those goals and strategies, but also a lot of training. So if you have a lot of employees or a lot of folks in your organization who haven't necessarily done the work on themselves, on understanding systems, on understanding how they all interact with one another, then it can be very challenging to make any kind of organizational change. And that takes fiscal commitment. It takes people power commitment, labor commitment on a lot of different fronts. So yeah, that would be my quick answer to that. I think I always, when students particularly ask me, what do I need to do? What should I do first? What do I change? And I always say, you need to work on yourself. You need to organize yourself first and like really understand who you are, what your identity is, what your positionality is, how, particularly in my case, when you're teaching young people who are not necessarily the same demographic than you are, how are you going to stand in who you are and understand the reception that you might get? And that's a really challenging and uncomfortable, oftentimes, position to be in, but it's a really important part of being an organizer and being an educator.
Well, thank you so much, Anita. Thank you, Kenna, for reminding me about the Q&A. My screen is condensed, so I didn't see that part. So this question comes from Kenna, and it's for Anita, and I'm going to butcher your institute, so I'm not even going to say the name. But Kenna says she's not very familiar with the institute and is curious if you could give a little bit more background history on the organization and what is the relationship with Prescott College.
Yeah, just as I mentioned earlier, XITO, came out of the banning of ethnic studies, Mexican American studies in Tucson. It was a way to continue the legacy of that program by using a model that has been so successful with particularly youth of color, low-income youth in teaching of ethnic studies. And so after that program was banned, all of a sudden there was this huge call for ethnic studies across the country, particularly on the West Coast. Now, California has just recently passed legislation requiring high school students to take a course in ethnic studies, and now at some of the university systems as well, and community colleges. So all of a sudden, everybody's like, we believe in this, we don't know how to do it, right? How do we do this? And so we go around the country, and there's a lot of orgs that do this to train educators and how to develop curriculum, how to understand, systems of oppression, how it interacts and intersects in an educational setting. And so that's what XITO does. We're basically a grassroots education consultant collective. We're also, I would say, very community responsive. And so when the California curriculum was actually first written for this legislation, it was immediately removed because the folks that had written that curriculum, many of them who are our comrades and colleagues, actually, wrote it in a very critical decolonizing manner. And so immediately it was attacked because it included Palestine and it included a decolonial lens. And so it was removed, and now it's been replaced with a newer curriculum that's a little bit watered down. And so that's, one of those challenges when you have this sweeping legislation that sounds great because it is a requirement. It can also become something that is very much one size fits all, and then you have to do it that way. And so we are working with a lot of different orgs and different folks organizing to build this coalition of organizations that are continuing the liberated ethnic studies decolonizing kind of curriculum and helping and supporting school districts in implementing that. So that's most of the work that we do.
Nice. Thank you for going in more detail.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 7 minutes left and we have 4 questions. So be mindful of your answers, but there's questions for all of you. So we'll start with Roger. It says, can you talk about the experiential learning model at Prescott College? About like the faculty, classmates, and assignments?
Yes, specifically, when you get involved with Prescott College in this particular program, you will do you will actually have some field activities. They kind of changed it how they used to do it, but those kind of field activities will come in a class. And then specifically too, with me, I utilized some of the work that I was doing with political campaign organizing. So my regular job is with the Teamsters as a Southern Region political coordinator. So during that time where I was able to do field work, I did field work with the election 2020 campaign, and did work in Georgia where both Senators John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock were elected to the Senate seat, giving the Democrats the majority in the US Senate. So you can use those kinds of activities, political campaign organizing, or union organizing, or community organizing in your studies, and utilize those activities in the kind of research papers that you will be doing.
Great, thank you. And feel free to connect with Roger. He is always so happy to talk with prospective students. So his email's in the chat. Feel free to reach out if you want some more examples about that. All right, this question is for you, Teresa. Can you talk about what is fulfilling about a career with the labor movement?
Yeah, I think for me, any organizing job, particularly in the labor movement as well, is an opportunity to kind of be your best self, to actually really full-time, the majority part of our life, be able to try and improve things, to be able to connect with other people, build community, long-term community. So and not only that, you get to do that for yourself, and then you also get to be around people that are also doing that. So it's just, it's a wonderful, wonderful place to work. There are contradictions in any organization. So unions have problems around race and gender and all that stuff, queer issues. We, you know, when Pamela was saying the 14.6 million, there's more women in the labor movement than there are in now. There's more African Americans in the labor movement than are in the NAACP. It's a massive organization and organizations, and there's a lot of work to be done. So we do actually a lot of the kind of work that Anita's talking about on decolonization and anti-racism work within our own unions, both in this country and globally as well. And more of that needs to be done, obviously. So. But it's a great place to work. Not always easy, but as long as you want to connect with other people. And I was very shy when I started organizing. I started community organizing, and I was from the country, rural Canada, and I ended up talking to people door to door, and I would not have done it if I'd had enough money for a ticket out of there, but I didn't. So I just ended up doing it, and it really changed my life. It just brings a level of skill to your personal and kind of community and friendship life as well. At least it really has for me. So
nice. This is my first time meeting you, Teresa, but I wouldn't say I would get the shy feeling from you. So.
And Prescott, I want to say before we go that Prescott is very connected to the work in Southern California that we're doing. So if anybody's interested in that more, they could either talk to me or to Zoe Hammer as well. So she's been out and been involved with us and knows it quite well.
Very nice. I know we're just shy of 2 minutes. So Anita, you have touched on this before, but if there's anything else you want to add, the question is, can you talk about the importance of bringing organization skills into classrooms and careers in education?
Yeah, I would just echo, a lot of what Roger and Teresa have said about, the importance of those organizing skills. Our teachers have to have organizing skills, particularly right now, in order to counter a lot of the pushback that they're feeling. And those skills are actually very much in line with what it means to have best practices in a classroom, right? And they overlap quite a bit. And so some of the best organizers I know who are educators and vice versa. And there's just a union there, no pun intended, but yeah, that, one has to, I saw with the teachers that were up against the fight here in Tucson, there were only a couple of them that actually had organized, formal organizing backgrounds. And they got burned out because they had to be at the forefront of everything. And had they had, a lot of the other teachers having those skills, it would have made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Wow, well, this hour is just flown by. I wish I had an hour with each one of you as our panelists, because there are so many questions I know our guests have and I still have. So for those of you that are attending, I believe all three panelists have put their contact information in the in the notes. Oh, and Zoe's email is in there too now. So feel free to reach out to any of the panelists. You can also reach out to Naomi and I if you want to be connected to them as well. So we're happy to facilitate those connections. And do stay in touch with what Prescott College is doing, whether you're already a student here, you're thinking of a student here, or even just very engaged in the work that we are doing through our programs. We're here to, help you find the careers that have meaning. So once again, I really want to thank Roger and Teresa and Anita for their time. Thank you, Naomi, for co-hosting, and thank you especially to all of you who have taken time out of your busy schedule to join us. We really do appreciate your time. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and turn off recording and let you all go now. But thanks again for joining us at Impact Careers. Remember, the next one is on April 20th, where we're going to talk about teaching and education. And there's also a very important part of social justice and equity in that, as we've talked to today. So join us for that as well. Thanks, everyone.